The New York Mets have won 6 games in a row after sweeping the Marlins this weekend. They open up their next series with Max Scherzer starting game 1, and this guy's return, Jacob deGrom, in game 2. Things could not be looking any more up for this Mets ball club. We're going to be talking about all of that on this edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by Vroom. With Vroom, you can buy a car entirely online and have it delivered straight to you, so you never have to go to a dealership again. Next time you need to buy a car, just grab your phone, go to vroom.com, and check out thousands of great cars. Now, the Mets pitching was outstanding in this series, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. The starters were very solid. The bullpen was great, but this lineup has woke up. On Sunday, Daniel Vogelbach comes into the lineup, and I don't know if it was him that just got this team going because he is getting on base more than half the time since entering this lineup, or if it's just a combination of all these guys coming alive at the same time. Jeff McNeil, Brandon Nimmo getting out of some slumps, Starling Marte, who has just been scorched earth since July, Lindor starting to heat up a bit, even Escobar and Canna are giving you good at-bats. Even the catchers have had some solid contributions since last Sunday. So this team is just on a roll offensively. They've won 6 games in a row, and you look at each game of this series, and it was just the same lineup that we saw pre-June, right? This team went through a lot of struggles for maybe it was a 7-week stretch, you could say 7-8-week stretch, beginning in June, leading into July, leading into the All-Star break. And now they've come out of it here after a rough, first 2 games back. And between the final game of the series against the Padres, the 2 games against the Yankees in this series, this lineup looks functional again. Now, game 1, Brandon Nimmo and Starling Marte each had multi-hit games. Marte was a double short of the cycle. Each of them had 3 RBIs. You had Francisco Lindor, who went 1 for 2 with 3 walks. You have Vogelbach, who had 2 doubles. And since I just mentioned Lindor, just noting now in my head because he has 2 3-hit games to close out this series. So got on base, 9 times or 10 times? Insanity for Lindor there. But you go to this game, and the Mets are losing 3-0 as they get into the top of the second inning. But this is a team that can rally back, and they did so in a hurry. Brandon Nimmo drove in a run with a double. Starling Marte drove in 2 with a triple, and the Mets were right back even. Now, Bassitt gives up another run in the bottom of the second, but from there he settled down. We'll talk about the pitching a little more in the next segment, but after it gives up that run, the Mets were trailing. He was able to hold on through 6, and the Mets tied it in the 4th as Starling Marte, once again, noting those 2 guys, hit his home run. Then later on in the game, in the 8th inning, it was Brandon Nimmo's turn as he hit a 2-run shot, gave the Mets a 6-4 lead, and they were able to hold on and get the victory. And again, we'll talk about the pitching more in the next segment, but the bullpen, great at holding that one down. Game 2, Mets really cruise here. Carlos Carrasco, obviously the player of the game, had an amazing start. But you look at the offense, Jeff McNeil homers in the top of the 3rd. The Mets gave him a little bit of a silent treatment as he got into the dugout, which is always fun to see. It also just felt like the vibes in that dugout for whatever reason in Miami, because they were just winning games or coming off that series against the Yankees, or you added some fresh blood with Vogelbach and the Tyler Naquin trade. So you just have maybe this good combination right now, but this team knows that they're special, and you're seeing it in celebrations like that. You're seeing it when Brandon Nimmo, the guy that's nowhere near this boisterous dude, is just loud and proud when he hits that home run to give the Mets a lead. So I think that's something that's good to see. After McNeil homers, you had Francisco Lindor driving a run that inning as well. Later on the game, Lindor homers in the 8th. It was a low-scoring game until the Mets kind of broke it open in that 8th inning. J.D. Davis pinch hit for Vogelbach, and he hit a home run. I will note, as I am obviously a very prominent J.D. Davis hater, that was a left-handed pitcher, so he finally did his job. But hanging pitch, 90 miles an hour, right in his wheelhouse, kind of low in the strike zone. That's where he likes it. He hit it a long way. Credit to JD Davis, not trying to take away from all of his accomplishments, but just because he hits a home run here does not mean that I move off my point that the Mets should try to find a better right-handed complement at DH or promote Mark Vientos. If JD Davis is still getting these at-bats after the deadline, I will be severely disappointed. But the Mets cruise again to a 4-0 win in game 2. Then you get to Sunday's game, the one I just watched here. And, 19 hits as a team, 8 for 18 with runners in scoring position. In the first inning, Nimmo lines out, but you have Lindor and Alonso double, so the Mets are immediately on the board. Vogelbach drives in a run. McNeil drives in a run with a single. Canna drove in a run with a single. Then you have the third inning. McNeil doubles. Tyler Naquin triples. Probably should have been a single, maybe a double if he would have legged it out. Would have driven McNeil regardless, but some pretty bad defense by that Marlins team. Bleday tried to dive and make the catch. One of those two guys, De La Cruz and Bleday, who are converging on the ball, has to back up the other. I was watching the Marlins broadcast come in South Florida. They said, De La Cruz did a nice job backing up. I don't know what they saw, but to me, I saw two guys who didn't have good communication. The ball bounces over De La Cruz's head after Bleday can't get to it, and that allows Naquin to get to third base. But good for the Mets. That sets them up for even more runs because you have Canna drives in another with the single, both of his RBI singles, just shooting holes with ground balls. Great to see professional at bats. Doesn't matter how you drive in the runs as long as you're coming through in those spots. Nimmo drove in Canna with the single as well. And bottom line here, the Mets just once again are able to kind of dominate. They score more runs later on in the game. But look, you talk about the way that this team produces time and again. And just to see this lineup, you have Lindor, Alonso, Vogelbach, McNeil, Canna, Guillorme, Mazika, all have multi-hit games. And you just look at what this lineup can be top to bottom with some of the combinations they've put together. And again, there's really only one source spot to me. It's who are you going to play at DH against left-handed pitching? And it can be as simple as calling up Mark Vientos. It can. I think as we look at this deadline, obviously that's kind of the primary focus of everybody right now is where, on Monday when you're listening to this, you're getting close to whatever it is. Less than 40 hours away to the completion of the trade deadline here. I just don't know how important it is to push all your chips on the table to get a Contreras, to get a JD Martinez. I don't know if it's better to get a complimentary piece, to get a Wilmer Flores, if you can have him for a reasonable price, because this roster to me is in really good shape right now. Naquin and Vogelbach, they aren't the sexiest of names. It is very similar to Kelly Johnson and Juan Uribe, but that 2015 team, had the Cespedes edition. I don't think that this team needs it because all the other pieces around, that potential big move are solid. So the Vogelbach edition could be enough because here's this guy who since Sunday, the Mets haven't lost with him in the lineup. He's 6 for 16 with 5 walks and 2 doubles, hitting 375, 545 on base. You're getting really good at bats. As long as he doesn't see a left-hander, that solves the DH issue. You just have to find that guy that can hit against the left-handed pitching. And it's really just up to the Mets to see if that can be JD Davis, my least likely or my least favorable of the options, in my opinion, whether that's Vientos or whether you can go out and swing a deal for one of these guys we talked about, whether it is a Drury or Flores, or if it's the bigger ticket items like Mancini, JD Martinez, or Wilson Contreras. But the bottom line here, this Mets team has now won 10 of their 14 matchups against the Marlins. They're 30-12 against this division, and they're 64-37 on the season. Outstanding stuff, and they have a chance to improve all of those records against the Nationals here, where they can go even more, heavy against the division, continue to beat up on some of these bad teams, and extend their lead against the Atlanta Braves. But I want to talk about the great pitching the Mets got in this series in just a minute. Before we do, though, as you gear up for the fall, you need the right people on your team to help your small business fire on all cylinders. And LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find the people you want to talk to faster and for free. There you can create a free job post in minutes, and you can reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. Then add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring so your network can help you find the right people to hire. Simple tools like screening questions make it easier to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. That's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. Did you know that every week nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonmlb. That's linkedin.com/lockedonmlb to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Let's talk about the pitching in this series because you have Chris Bassitt, Carlos Carrasco, and Taijuan Walker. And in the next segment, we're going to talk about the first two pitchers in the upcoming series, Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom. For your back end of your rotation, 3 through 5, to have three veterans who are as accomplished as these guys are, pitching the way they are right now, it is an incredible luxury to have. Even what is considered maybe a bad start or just not quite a quality start for Bassitt, he gave them at 6 innings in a game where they had runs. So, yes, he falters early. He gives up 3, gives up another run to blow the lead after the Mets had just tied the game for them, or not necessarily blow the lead, but blow the tie there. Still, he's such a good veteran pitcher that he's able to figure it out. And I think part of that is, the cerebral makeup of a Chris Bassitt, because this is a guy that's certainly trying to play chess out there with his million different pitch variations and all the things he brings to the table. But he was solid, even in the start. We give 4 runs. And obviously, when the lineup scores, it helps, and it helps him, be in that position to not necessarily get a win because the runs came after he exited, but to help the Mets get through a game where you don't have to tax the bullpen too much. And, you look at what they did after that for the bullpen. Adam Ottavino was looking like a really quality late inning reliever for the Mets. I still think they had to add one, at least one, if not 2. But Ottavino as your 7th inning guy, to me, is perfectly fine. It's, can you plug in someone a little bit better, a little bit more trustworthy right behind Diaz? But in this game, for the 7th, gets 2 strikeouts in a scoreless inning. Trevor Williams goes out. He pitches a 1-2-3/8. Edwin Diaz goes out and nearly pitches an immaculate inning. 10 pitches to get 3 strikeouts, 1 foul tip away from that incredibly rare feat. So Diaz is just filthy, and you get that pitching on Friday night. Saturday, Carlos Carrasco turns into the best start of the weekend. As I said, just a whole different planet over the past month here. 7 2/3 scoreless, 4 hits, 2 walks, 7 strikeouts. But you look at his ERA in July of 0.90. I don't know what other pitchers have done in July, but based on those stats, we would be completely shocked if Carlos Carrasco has the quietest, NL pitcher of the month that we've ever seen, because I don't feel like we've talked about him too much yet. Here he is. He's lowered his ERA by almost a full run from 4.64 to 3.79, and he's leading the Mets with 11 wins. And I know wins aren't a stat that we care about anymore, but this is a guy that is probably your 4th starter, depending on how you kind of stack up Bassitt, Walker, and Carrasco. Maybe technically your 5th starter, and he's at 11 wins and likely to get across 15 wins. And I think that when you talk about the type of pitcher that Carrasco is, that stat does mean something to me, because a lot of times he goes out and he gets you through games. He goes deep, and he's had the blow-up starts, but he's had more starts that he's been good than he's been bad. And that's why for weeks and even months heading into this deadline, I've been saying the Mets didn't need any starting pitching. And this weekend, you see why they don't, because yes, there's no guarantee Jacob deGrom is going to make this healthy return and stay in the rotation the whole year. But you still have David Peterson now parked in AAA. And when Tyler McGill comes back, Tyler is going to be a reliever, but he's always an option as well. So the depth is great. The pitching was great this weekend. Taijuan Walker closed it out 5 2/3 on Sunday, 7 hits, 3 earned runs. It seemed like got a little bit gassed at the end. Tommy Hunter came on to get the final out of the 6th. And then Steven Nogosek pitched really well, 2 scoreless innings. And what's interesting about him is he has a 0.61 ERA now in 14 2/3 at the major league level, which is dangerously close to the sample size. Everyone was freaking out on Colin Holderman. You look at Holderman, 17 2/3, 2.04 ERA. He had 18 strikeouts. Nogosek now, after 2 more scoreless today, I think the strikeouts are a little bit low in comparison to Holderman, but you look at what he did in the minors, and in the minors, the strikeouts were great. So he got 12 strikeouts and 14 2/3 in the majors. But you look at his minor league numbers this year, He's pitching to a 0.99 ERA, and his strikeout per nine is over 10. I mean, he's been really solid. And so now you have this other guy that I'm not saying he's right there with Colin Holderman, but I mean, realistically, you're talking about a reliever in Nogasek that's 27. It's not completely different. And you got Yohan Lopez, who closed this game, has been good for the Mets as well. So this isn't to say that Nogasek or that Holderman wasn't a good reliever the Mets dealt, but I think this is why they were comfortable dealing him, because you have these other guys that can fill a similar role. And I imagine the Mets make a pretty big swing at the deadline to get in at least one lockdown reliever. But still, when we look at the overarching story as we enter this week, it's the deadline, obviously, but it's the fact that on Tuesday, the day that is the trade deadline, the biggest possible addition in the sport, if healthy, is going to be Jacob deGrom after this trade deadline. He is going to start on Tuesday, and he is joining a Mets rotation that has pitched to a 1.95 ERA since July. It's pretty incredible to think about. I want to talk about it more in just a minute, but betonline.net is your number one source for all of your betting needs and sports info. Find out the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, as BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Now, when the Mets announced that Max Scherzer was going to start game one and Jacob deGrom was going to start game two, my tweeted reaction to that news was to say this would be so baseball for the Nationals to win this series, because that's just what the game is, right? You look at this, and I never want to just get that loud out there and say, how could the Mets possibly lose this series? But how could the Mets possibly lose this series? You got Max Scherzer versus Patrick Corbin. You got Jacob deGrom versus Corey Abbott, who, I mean, has no real long-term big league success at all. Chris Bassitt versus Anibal Sanchez. And if you look at the numbers this year, Sanchez is kind of washed too. I mean, it looks like a prime opportunity to have a really long winning streak, in my opinion. Now, I know they lose later on Monday night. Everyone's going to be coming at me. Fine, whatever. I'm just calling it like I see it, though. Look at how that stacks up for this Mets team. And that is the type of thing going into the deadline that just continues to give you confidence. Let's just say the Mets do, win the next two games with Scherzer and deGrom. And then starting on that final game of the series, or at least going into the big series this weekend, the 5-game set starting on Thursday, Mets versus Braves, that could be a prime opportunity for the Braves to take the division back from the Mets. If they were to do some crazy stuff in that series, you never know. You got to stack these wins. But if you stack these wins and then you get David Robertson, or you make a trade and you acquire Gregory Soto from the Tigers, or Michael Fulmer, or any of these big names, Jorge Lopez, one of these relief pitchers, and let's just say even go out and get a bat. Let's say it is a Wilmer Flores or Brandon Drury, or maybe it's the JD Martinez or Trey Mancini's of the world. Regardless, if you're adding even more fresh blood to a team that's already made a couple additions, ahead of the deadline, that is rolling right now, and then you go out and let's just say the Mets sweep the Nats and win 3 of 5 against the Braves, you're going to be feeling so good about yourselves as a team heading into this stretch run of the season. And I do think that this was a Mets team that I watched personally in Chicago that seemed to be dragging a little bit. And since that final game against the Padres, it seemed like the life is back in that clubhouse. Now, I don't know if that's just getting a big funny guy in Vogelbach who's giving good at bats. I don't know if that's just kind of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel and wanting to just grab it and run through it. But this is a team that's about to get Jacob deGrom back, and they currently are having the best season since maybe 2006. And now you add the GOAT, right? The back-to-back Cy Young, a guy who, if not for the shortened season in 2020 and getting injured last year, I honestly believe that what we saw from Jacob deGrom from 2018 through 2021 would have been, provided health and full seasons, the greatest 4-year stretch a pitcher's ever put together. That's how good he had been previous to these injuries. I mean, we know what it was last year. In 2020, I still think Trevor Bauer was able to steal a Cy Young that would have gone to Jacob deGrom if the season was longer. And that would have been back-to-back-to-back Cy Youngs. Only two pitchers ever have done that. I think it's Greg Maddux and Randy Johnson, if I'm not mistaken. It's either Maddux and Johnson or Maddux and Martinez, but something that's so rare. Could have been a 4 in a row. I mean, that's how dominant DeGrom is when he's healthy, and he's healthy right now. Some of the big quotes obviously came back. He's going to opt out after this season. Not something you worry about now. I said that, getting back onto the mound is going to feel like his debut again. That's amazing to see. And what you hope here is that Jacob deGrom goes through this run with the Mets and he's healthy, and suddenly he's seeing what it's like to be part of a Mets team that's really good. And in an ideal world, the Mets come to terms with him and Scherzer, and well, they already have Scherzer, but they can lock down deGrom this offseason and everything works out and you have this long window to contend. But enjoy the season you're about to watch, because the fact that we're finally going to get it this week, Scherzer and deGrom back-to-back, which also sets them up to pitch some of the closing games of that series. Jacob deGrom should pitch next Sunday, the final game of that 5-game set, which theoretically could be like a rubber match game in a 5-game series, which would be electric. It's just a lot of excitement ahead of us here. Deadline and great baseball. What else do you want as a fan? Anyway, that's going to be all for this edition of Locked On Mets. Sure, we're going to be previewing more stuff. We'll see if any trades happen. Obviously, keep yourself subscribed to the YouTube channel or follow us wherever you get podcasts, because anytime there's a big trade or even maybe a little one, depending on the scope of it, I'll be recording bonus, rapid reaction podcasts, giving you the most comprehensive coverage that I can leading through this pivotal next 48 hours. Thank you for making this your first listen today. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB, hosted by Paul Francis Sullivan. Locked On MLB is where you want to go to stay today with everything else going on in Major League Baseball. You can follow Locked On MLB wherever you get podcasts.